Oh, there's the audio. I just muted myself in 3 places, so it took me a bit to get back in. So, thank you everyone for being so patient with us. It seems like we had
Indeed.
complete audio failure. So I sort of regret not doing a test last night or something. But anyway, welcome everyone to our season 2 premiere. I am Lynx, I am from Norway, and I have my wonderful co-hostess Katrina here.
Hello. Yes. Katrina, I'm representing the Britons here. It's not all Europeans. And also, tonight we have an American for a guest. Specifically, the name is American Zarathustra, otherwise known as Donald Kent.
Thank you so much for having me, ladies. Very, very pleased to be on your show. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, it's an honor to have you. Thank you for wanting to join us. Some of you might know we had a wonderful conversation with Donald and Nicholas Krampus before Christmas. So
yes,
that's how we got to know each other, and we wanted to return the favor. So tonight we have Donald with us.
Wonderful, yeah, and thank you so much. We really enjoy your show.
Yes, and yeah, do forgive us the boom attack. There was a lot of boom attack going on just then, but we are up and running.
Yes, I think Loki was having some fun with us there.
Yeah,
a little bit, maybe.
Yeah,
just a bit.
But here we are.
He's branched out into tech problems.
Yeah. Well, audio is the bane of everything, isn't it? So, you wouldn't think so many different platforms had issue with one or another, but apparently so. So, but we finally managed to be here. I hope everyone is having a wonderful new year, despite the circumstances, of course. But, let's resume our cozy Sundays with folk tales and stories and discussions around them.
Yes.
Looking forward to it.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Everybody can use some cozy tales.
Indeed.
In miserable January and February. Not the nicest months.
Well, it's a good thing that we've got this nice cabin that we can sit around the fire and listen to stories.
Yeah.
Ah, yes. Our lovely cabin. It is back. We had the Christmas residence for December.
Lovely.
But yes, the cabin is back.
Yeah.
Yeah. So today's theme, I guess it's suitably depressing for January, isn't it? Death. Just death.
I thought it was
what we're coming back at you with, folks.
I thought it was October all of a sudden.
Yeah, sometimes it seems like
it did get a bit spooky.
It's a very interesting topic and something that I have really gone deep into researching all through my life. It doesn't have to be such a dark, gloomy topic. It's something that I've finally come to a certain place with where I'm very comfortable with it. And when you go deep into studying death and life, mortality, the meaning of life, all these things, if you have the right sense of things, then you come out stronger, more peaceful, happier, and able to help other people with their grieving, which I think is a really important part of life too.
I mean, Donald, primarily you are involved in art and you discuss art. I know you do Imperium art and you have a philosophy about that. And I suppose there are themes of death also that crop up in art, and it's one of the big aspects of human life that art maybe tries to handle as well.
Yes, absolutely. Love and death, I guess, are the only two topics really, and everything else spins off of that. But I would say in Imperium art, arts that are focused on white replacement and white identity politics, we are concerned with the notion of heroism. We're concerned with the notion of sort of defending our people, our lands, our heritage, our children, our future. And that, in a way, is facing death. We're facing the mortality of our people and our cultures, Western civilization. So it's not only just the individual
Yes.
experience of it, but the broader picture of it. So it's definitely very relevant.
Absolutely. You know, the individual faces death, but civilizations on a collective level
Mhm.
also, if they're not careful, do face death. I mean,
Mhm.
one could argue that a civilizational death is eventually inevitable, but certainly you want to preserve a civilization and a culture for as
sure.
long as you possibly can.
Yeah. I think
But yeah,
there's a spirit here of going boldly forward, fearlessly, and in a sense, laughing in the face of death, and then wanting a glorious death, and wanting to leave a legacy. So this is the spirit with which I look at death. I have a very big story to tell regarding what this means to me, and what I can offer the audience and in this show. But I'm kind of just sort of following your lead in terms of the show programming. But I'll just quickly say that when I was young, my father got very ill when I was 14, and when I was 18, he passed away. And that set my life off on a totally different trajectory, where I was studying philosophy and world religions to find out what is the meaning of life. And journey has taken me around the world, and I've learned a lot of very esoteric practices that now I'm able to kind of combine all of these different practices, experience, research into my philosophy. And I feel that I can provide at least my experience. I think that, all of us do question the, life after death, uh, all the spirits, God's nature, what does it all mean? And I've come to terms with those things very comfortably, so I can share that. It doesn't have to be a sort of a morose, uh, kind of a dour, sad, gloomy topic. It's really something that I see more. I see it the opposite way. I feel that this world is not our true home, and that we're, in a sense, our bodies are like spacesuits. And that try to look at the analogy of, if you were to be a deep sea diver and exploring the world deep under the ocean, you'd have to have a special kind of suit that would allow you to survive down there. And so that's pretty much what our bodies are, and our consciousness, our spirit doesn't really totally belong here.
yes,
That's why we are more
somewhat.
that we die. We're not meant to be here.
Yeah. No, I fully agree with you there. I've been reading quite a bit of the Bhagavad Gita of late, and I agree with the notion of most things about you being outward dress that can be changed with another life. And you definitely have duties to fulfill according to your physical place, gender role, and time.
Right.
But at the same time, you are at your core what they call an Atman. So it's very much sort of in line with what I think about how the soul is. Yeah.
So one of the big obstacles about talking about death is finding a common language, common terms. I think you and I are familiar with certain terms that are used, say, in the Far East, but I generally try to use language that people know about, just to bypass misunderstandings. There are subtle meanings and changes in definitions. And when you translate words from, say, Chinese or Tibetan or etc., then you kind of lose something of the true meaning of it. So it's tough to grapple with. It's tough to talk about sometimes.
Yeah. It absolutely is. But, you know, I think that's why it's good that we're having folk stories about death today, because it shows us a little bit about how people related to death, just ordinary people with, you know, an ordinary life, and how they viewed that really threatening sort of presence it may have felt like to them, because, you know, at certain times of history, death was just around the corner.
Oh yeah
For everyone. You know, it didn't matter what age. And I think we'll see some interesting insights today into how those things are sort of dealt with. I think
I'm sorry. Just that living in modern times, that we're so comfortable, and I think in a sense you could almost say convenience is killing us. Like we don't have these you know, like the wolf outside the door, or the neighboring army across the valley, and all these urgent issues where death literally is just behind you, you know, nipping at your heels. And in some way, I feel that you lose a certain energy and spirit and love for life when you're not living close to danger. So, you know, we feel that through video games, sports, and whatnot, but it, of course, is cheating. This is part of why I love martial arts and why I love sparring. Is that sparring is the closest thing you can get to real combat without injuring or killing yourself or somebody else. But I always I always try to get to that level where I'm triggering the fight or flight fear mechanism in my mind, perhaps in probably the lower brain. And that what happens when you're in that state of biological terror is you enter a new mentality where all your senses are hyper alive and your consciousness is super tuned in, and you become larger than yourself. And then that's where I'll then apply, you know, certain principles of strategy that I learned, you know, in kung fu and these kinds of things. But it's an exciting experience. It's exhilarating.
I think many people who have those, who go sort of chasing thrills, who do mountain biking or like climbing in extreme places, or, you know, going to risky places, they say much the same sort of thing. They say that it's, you know, it's a thrill that you can't actually get anywhere else, and it makes you appreciate life a lot more. Although you will tend to find really that a lot of the people who do this, obviously men a lot of the time, because I think obviously it's more within the male character to go constantly seeking risk.
Yeah, the men are
or constantly seeking that sort of
there's something to
on
it.
the edge of death.
If you look at the Western kind, we're explorers, we're settlers, we're inventors, and that's risk taking. So that's a kind of other side of our character. We also have to conserve things and preserve things. We have to think for the future. So you do have to have a good balance where you have one foot, you know, on the risk taking side and the other foot grounded. So it does speak to the Western experience, though. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the men tend to be more of the explorers. But as we've seen over the centuries, they do have women that go with them as well, or some who want to go by themselves. It was when America was being settled by Europeans. I only learned this about a year ago or so. It turned out they had too many men over there, so they tended to get a bit rowdy, in particular with the native women. That is a common problem when there are too many men and too few women. So the European kings who had the territory over in America, they actually tried to find women who wanted to go over, and they found in particular many in the Netherlands, both Dutch women and also Norwegian women actually, who had gone from Norway to Netherlands, and they went over to the Americas and were part of founding New York and everything. So that was actually quite interesting.
New Amsterdam, yes.
That is interesting indeed.
It's kind of like the state of the dissident.
I suppose it makes sense.
It's sort of like the state of the dissident, right? There's too many guys, and everybody's infighting. So yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
That's changing though. Beautifully, I'm very, very grateful for that.
We're pulling over more women. More women are realizing that they have stuff to lose.
We're so happy that you're part of this sphere. It's very, very important. I recently interviewed Kiz Cardassian. I've got a number of wonderful female content developers coming on Imperium Art in the coming days, and then of course I'm so happy to be friends with Jody Kay and other people in Europe as well. So it's exciting. It really rounds out and balances out our whole culture. So it's wonderful.
Yeah. Oh, would just like to thank Euphemia Signe for the diamond. I was very kind. Very kind indeed. Always said thank you in the chat, but just shouting out on stream.
Yeah, and we
wonderful. Do appreciate the diamonds.
Yeah, and we got a bunch of ice creams as well, and we really appreciate it.
Well, don't eat them all at once.
No, that will give you a tummy ache.
I'm sweet enough.
Sending us a bunch of cornettos. Well, this isn't what I thought they meant. What do I do with these? Oh dear. Yeah. So it's come up to about the 15-minute mark. We should probably have a story.
That'd be great.
I think.
Yeah.
All right, I got my hot chocolate ready. I'm all ready to go.
Yeah.
Very.
I was just thinking we could start with one of Katrina's, Via Mysteria.
Yes.
So
you wrote this.
I like that one. No, I didn't write it. Just in case anyone's ever confused,
right.
I'm not a writing talent, and neither of us really write. What we do is we find all stories from all over the world, and we read them out, and kind of do a bit of an analyzation of them, in case anybody is new joining us.
Yeah.
But this one's from Puerto Rico.
Yeah, I
actually probably should put some of the prose. I should put some of the Prozetta stories into my own sort of words. I would like to do that, but yeah, when it comes to making up plots, I'm probably not your person. I'm more of a historian.
Yeah.
To be honest,
I have enough with translating Norwegian stories into English.
Wow.
So,
it's like a super
well, it's good to have native English speakers on hand at times. To get certain words.
My English is
right.
pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, for an American.
I speak American very well, too, by the way.
I just had to get that dig in there. Sorry.
So we're going in there tonight. That's where we're going tonight. I guess I'll have to be the referee.
Battle of the English speakers. Which one is the correct English?
Well,
the one from England.
I do a few good accents, so but I'd have to have a cup of mead or something before I have to go there.
Indeed.
Okay, I will. It is. I have to. Off a bit. First, just give me a couple seconds. I'm trying to do things in somewhat of a new way, and doesn't seem to be working quite as I thought. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, but I don't know. I like this one. Just because I don't know. I find aspects of it quite funny. I can't decide if the message is pessimistic or not.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Because I think on first glance, I think it might be pessimistic, but then I end up coming to the opinion it might be sort of a neutral kind of story.
Well,
Sort of illustrating truths about life.
Death is a complicated subject, so they tend to be on several levels. Okay, so let's take a listen to Tia Maria.
Yeah.
Tia Miseria, I'm sorry.
Tia Miseria. Tia Maria is a different thing entirely, I think.
That's how it goes when my head is overloaded. Okay,
Yep.
it's story time.
Tia Miseria. Aunt Misery. Once there was an old woman, known only to the people as Tia Miseria, Aunt Misery, who lived outside a small village. Tia Miseria was poor but happy. She had a garden with large vegetables, 2 big chickens, and most of all, she had her pear tree. Oh, how she loved her pear tree! She would pick a pear and feel its smooth form. When she would bite into the pear, she'd sigh and say, "Ah, how delicious! How marvellous! How sweet!" Tia Miseria was a proud woman, who walked through the village with her back straight, and her hair pulled back in a bun. Although she was very old, her skin was smooth, except for a few wrinkles around her eyes. But Tia Miseria had a problem with the children in the neighbourhood. These children were the great-grandchildren of the ones who had named her Tia Miseria. Indeed, her life had been miserable for a long time. The children would run right through her garden, step on all of her vegetables, and taunt, "Tia, Tia, Tia Miseria." They would climb her tree and pick some pears and bite into them. With the juice running down the sides of their mouths, they would say, "Tia, Tia, Tia Miseria." Poor Tia would get very upset. She would go under the tree and say to them, "Come down to my tree, right now." But the children would just look down at her and laugh. "Tia, Tia, Tia Miseria." Only when the children were good and ready would they climb down the tree. Then they would run through the garden calling out, "Tia, Tia, Tia Miseria." Poor Tia. She had to replant her garden because the children had. Then she had to go look for the chicken.
Okay, so some orders, so I'm going to read the story once again and start over. Just give me 1 second.
Tia Miseria. Misery. Once there was an old woman, known only to the people as Tia Miseria, Aunt Misery, who lived outside a small village. Tia Miseria was poor but happy. She had a garden with large vegetables, 2 big chickens, and most of all, she had her pear tree. Oh, how she loved her pear tree! She would pick a pear and feel its smooth form. When she would bite into the pear, she'd sigh and say, "Ah, how delicious! How marvellous! How sweet!" Tia Miseria was a proud woman, who walked through the village with her back straight, and her hair pulled back in a bun. Although she was very old, her skin was smooth, except for a few wrinkles around her eyes. But Tia Miseria had a problem with the children in the neighbourhood. These children were the great-grandchildren of the ones who had named her Tia Miseria. Indeed, her life had been miserable for a long time. The children would run right through her garden, step on all of her vegetables, and taunt, "Tia, Tia, Tia Miseria." They would climb her tree and pick some pears and bite into them. With the juice running down the sides of their mouths, they would say, "Tia, Tia, Tia Miseria." Poor Tia would get very upset. She would go under the tree and say to them, "Come down to my tree, right now." But the children would just look down at her and laugh. "Tia, Tia, Tia Miseria." Only when the children were good and ready would they climb down the tree. Then they would run through the garden calling out, "Tia, Tia, Tia Miseria." Poor Tia! She had to replant her garden because the children had stepped on everything. Then she had to go look for the chickens in the bushes, because the children frightened them so much. Worst of all, they were eating up her sweet, delicious pears. One night as she was cooking supper, she heard a knock at the door. When she went to see who it was, there stood a short, thin man with friendly brown eyes. He wore a straw hat. "Can I please stay the night?" the man inquired. "It is so cold outside." "Of course," said Tia Miseria. "Come in, come in." Tia served him a fine meal of rice, beans, and codfish. In the morning the man said, "Tia, I am a magician, and because you have been so generous, I will give you a wish." "A wish? Let's see what I can do. Maybe I will wish for silver. No, maybe I will wish for gold." Then she stopped, and smiled a very big smile. "I know what I want. Once someone is up my tree, they can't come down until I say the magical words." "Fine," said the magician. He said goodbye, and went walking down the road. The next day, the children came to the house. As usual, they ran through the garden, taunting, "Tia, Tia, Tia Miseria." They climbed the tree and picked some pears. They bit into the pears, and then threw the uneaten portions at the cats and the chickens. They threw the pears all over the garden. But Tia did not react as she usually did. Instead of standing under the tree and yelling at them, she went into the kitchen and brought out a cup of coffee. She stood on the porch and drank her coffee with a big smile on her face. The children knew something was very wrong. She never acted like this. So they did the one thing they knew would make her mad. They said, "Tia, Tia, Tia Miseria." But she just smiled and sipped her coffee and said, "Children, come down from the tree." "No, we're not ready," they replied. Finally, the children were ready to come down from the pear tree. But as they tried to climb down, they found they couldn't. The magic spell was working. "Tia, let us down," the children cried out to her. "It is very late." Tia sipped her coffee and looked at the children and smiled and said, "No." "Please," they called out to her again, "let us down. It is getting late. Tia was enjoying this very much. She looked at the children, took a sip of her coffee, smiled, and said, "No." Oh, the children begged and cried and pleaded. Finally, Tia went under the tree and said, "If I let you out of that tree, will you promise me never to come back?" The children responded immediately, "Si, yes." So she said her magic words, "Come down, come down, come down from my tree." The children came down as fast as they could. They ran around the garden instead of going through it, and they did not return. Now Tia was very happy. Her garden was quiet, her chickens were safe, and now she had her precious pear tree to herself. One afternoon when she was cooking supper and thinking about what had happened, she heard a knock at the door. She thought, "Oh, my friend has returned." She went to the door. A man stood there, but he was not her friend. He was a tall, thin man, and when he looked into her eyes, she felt as though she were falling into a deep, dark hole. She felt a shiver come over her body, and she stepped back. The man moved toward her. He looked her in the eyes and said, "I am Death, and I have come for you." Tia Miseria thought quickly. "Well," she sighed, "I knew you were going to come. Before we go, though, can we pick some pears to take with us?" "No, no," said Death. "I have a long list of people I have to get tonight. I don't have time." But Tia continued to talk about her pears and how wonderful and delicious they were to eat. Finally, Death could see that he wasn't ever going to get out of there unless he yielded. "Go and pick some pears," he said. "I want to leave." "Me?" Tia said. "I am a little old lady. Look at you. You are tall and young, and besides, you look like you could use a pear or two." Death was so exasperated that he said, "Fine. I will pick some pears." So he climbed the tree and picked some pears. He picked a few here and there, and then he was ready to climb down. But he could not go anywhere. He was caught in the magician's spell. Oh, he called her the most terrible things you have ever heard, and probably some other things you have never heard. "Old lady, let me down now!" But she did not obey. She just said to him, "Throw me a pear, please." She left him in the tree for a day, a week, a month, and finally a year. Finally the village priest came to her. "Please let him down," he pled. "No one's coming to church because they know they're not going to die." Tia just shrugged her shoulders. Then the undertaker came by. "Please let him down," he said. "I have no work and my children are hungry." Tia looked at the undertaker and said, "Change your trade." Finally, her very oldest friend came and spoke in a slow, halting voice. "Please, let him down. I am very tired, and I want to go. Everything hurts me. Please, I want to die." Tia could not refuse the request of her oldest friend. She went under the tree and said to Death, "If I let you down, would you promise never to return for me?" "Yes, yes," Death replied. He was tired of being in that pear tree. She said the magic words, "Come down, come down, come down from my tree." Death came down, leaned over her old friend gently, swooped her up in his arms, and went running down the road. Death did keep his promise, and so Tia lives on, and on. And that's why some say that as long as Death keeps his promise, there will be misery in this world.
Okay, so there we had a story about death. Our first for tonight. It seemed like people were enjoying themselves with it, and it really is a nice story. And for those who were watching our shows in our first season,
So yeah,
Beautiful.
that was
Wow.
which is, I think it was one of the first stories that I found sort of mentioning the Grim Reaper.
hmm.
And being Puerto Rican, I think it would probably originally be of some sort of Spanish or Portuguese influence or origin.
Fascinating.
It
yeah,
the most similar story I found was actually from Nepal,
Oh, wow.
weirdly enough.
I was
You read that beautifully, by the way.
Whoop. Links, how are we doing?
I have to start.
Mike Fireball.
I have to stop muting myself in
Yeah.
3 different places because I can't remember all of them. So I was starting
yep.
to say when you
All the
guys came in.
unmutes.
Yeah, I was starting to say when you came on that for those who followed us before Christmas in our first season, the ending of this story does have an echo in The Smith and the Devil that I read, with trapping the devil in a pear tree, and here it is death that is being trapped in a pear tree. So I found that very interesting.
I didn't know death like
You're
parrots.
breaking up to me slightly, Links.
Yeah, it's a bit heavy on the internet connection right now. But I think it's going better now.
Yeah.
But you know that happened because I can't get the landline for it. So.
Well, I didn't know death liked pears so much. I'll make sure I have some handy.
Yeah, well.
I mean, I think he was kind of begrudging about it, wasn't he? He was just like, if I must,
You know,
I don't get paid enough for this.
It does remind me of the Monty Python skit where the death comes, and you know, it was the salmon moose, and I don't know if anyone's seen that movie and that whole meaning of life. You know, it's quite funny. Someone hear about Discovery? Yes. Anyway, the one line in the story though that really caught my attention. The priest says that no one's going to church because no one is going to die. That has you know, that really reverberates in some way, and it's not to say that it's a critique of Christianity, but rather, if we weren't going to die, how would that change the way that we live?
Yeah, exactly, and it's you know that everyone is going to die, and that is one of the fundamentals in most religious and or spiritual quests. You know, it is to find a meaning in this time that we have here, and if it's one thing we know for sure, it is that we one day are going to die. So
well, if I can speak to that a little bit, I want to share a supernatural experience that I had. When my father passed away many, many years ago, and shortly after that, maybe a day or two after that, he visited me in my dream while I was sleeping. And it's not something that you can prove, right? You can't, you know, people may have to just say, well, that's what you think happened, but you were really just dreaming. But as we know, and I've studied lucid dreaming, by the way. If anyone knows anything about lucid dreaming, I strongly recommend people learn how to do that. There's a lot online you can learn about it, and dreaming and sleep, in a way, are an analogy for death in our lives. You know, why is it that every night, you know, the sun goes down and we all shut down and go into that state? It's kind of in some way like I think like a rehearsal for death. And through my own experiences, within a dream, you have what they call NPCs, or sort of like these kind of mannequin people that aren't real people. They're just part of the dream. And then if you,
Yeah.
in the case like my case, where my father came to me, he was extremely colorful and vivid, far, far more vivid than any other person in the dream. And he had his own ideas and could speak for himself and behave like an autonomous being. And, I can only say that I know it in my heart to be true, but I could obviously never prove such a thing. So when you're 18 years old and your dad dies tragically, it's extremely traumatic. So, I guess there is a case to say that perhaps that was my mind trying to heal myself. That would be the materialist way to look at it. But in that particular case, he just came to hold me and say, "I love you," and that was powerful, both on the sense that I needed to say goodbye, but also in the sense that it made me realize that spirits can visit you in your dreams. And so that's part of why I studied lucid dreaming, and I have had many other experiences in my life. But the second time my father came to me, he said that the dream itself was quite beautiful, maybe scary in some ways, but I was in a big old English mansion, like something like a castle. And I was walking down these stairs, and outside the window, he was floating in the night. And I came to him to try to reach out and connect with him. And he just said very, very slowly, while he was ascending into the sky, he said, "You will be at peace." And that was another profound experience for me to have. And of course, I'll never forget it. I actually made a painting about it. It gave me the answer that I needed, that I don't have to be so anxious about life. I don't have to fear death. And this is kind of the message that I'm trying to get across on this show.
Yeah, I'm definitely open for experiences like that. Well, I haven't had any dreams or anything like that. On several occasions, I have felt my grandmother by my side, and that has been in instances where she has not been on my mind for anything. I've just been, thinking about my own stuff and everything, and suddenly I have just felt her presence beside me, and I can't really explain it, or if it was just my mind going to her or something.
You make an interesting point about how we can't really explain it. And I think something that I want to say regarding that is that we have to question the tools of perception. Let's say, just for example, if you were to look at all the spectrum of, say, color or sound, our eyes and ears are only built to see one segment of that giant spectrum. There's sounds that animals can hear that we cannot hear, for example. And so you have to say, in this 3D realm that we're living in this mortal realm, and this mortal coil, as they say, in this body, you have to question and tune and clarify your senses to some extent, whereby your consciousness is not limited to your senses. And consciousness is the cornerstone of understanding life and death. And so when you, through meditation, in Tibet, they have something called dream yoga, which is obviously very much about lucid dreaming, but it plugs into their specific cosmology and practices. You begin to expand your consciousness and experience things, see things. Things come to you when you kind of turn your mind to a broader wavelength. I'll just put it that way. So I feel that maybe your experience with sensing your grandmother is something beyond your physical senses.
Yeah, I think so. And I've also heard too many stories about animals and ghosts to not believe in it. For example,
Agreed.
dogs meeting their deceased owner every day when he used to get from work when he was alive until his funeral, for example. So I definitely am a believer in that.
That is true. No, I fully believe like the experiences that both of you had described sound like yours, particularly Donald, sound extremely profound and extremely life altering. And yes, I certainly think that that must be their spirits coming back to contact you, because it's well documented that this can happen. You know, the ancients had the notion of it. The ancients always had the notion of sleep being a state in which you can go into other worlds. Spike the Jive had an interesting video actually, Dream Like a Pagan. That's a good one. Interesting.
I live so
I'll look
About the notion of sort of what pagans thought happened when you
Yeah.
dreamt.
Yeah, I'll check that out, but it seems I'm in a bit of disadvantage there because I rarely remember any dreams at all. You know.
Oh, neither do I. No.
Well,
Never, like,
this is what
always forget 'em.
lucid dreaming is about. Is it allows you to wake up in your dreams, so much so that you're as awake as you are now, and it's very weird and very amazing at the same time to realize, my God, I'm actually awake in my dream. But you can imagine anything and make it occur. You can fly, you can
That's true.
any kind of thing you can imagine. So anyway, but the topic of like life and death and spirits, I should say that in the spirit world, they're not all good spirits. So you don't always want
No,
to be visited.
not always.
And I would say, I would recommend to anybody who wants to practice lucid dreaming that if you do encounter a spirit of this kind, you want to ask it, who do you serve? And generally that question right away will make them disappear if they're not of good intention. So that's something to consider. I also wanted to talk a little bit about like people who commit suicide. There's this notion,
Yeah.
if I kill myself, then I'm free from all my problems. But it's actually the opposite. You come to this life to experience it, to evolve, and learn from your suffering, to grow from your suffering. And you know, that's how we grow, through stress and suffering.
I'd say we have it even in this story, because the first thing that I took away from this story is that the one thing death can't kill is suffering, is misery. I fully believe that, you know, if you are to kill yourself to escape suffering, that is not the end for you. You will probably have to face something else in a next life or in an afterlife.
Right. It's hard to prove and quantify these things, but I'll give you an analogy. Like if you met somebody who let's say you wanted to travel to, I don't know, pick a country, you know, I don't know, Peru or something, and you wanted to see the ancient ruins or something. And so you could read books about it, you could watch videos, you might even meet people from Peru. But if you don't go there yourself, you will never really know. So if you meet somebody who's been there and knows the lay of the land like perfectly, wouldn't you trust their advice? You know, to some extent, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, when we seek answers about life and death, the afterlife, spirituality, I think we need to seek people that have experiences that are beyond our own, and not just kind of cling to books, cling to ideas, to go out there. And that's part of that spirit of exploration that we were talking about earlier, the idea of, you know, getting on the boats and going off into the ocean to see what happens and facing the dangers.
Yeah.
But the rewards are very great.
Just to a thought that I have about the story itself. I just found it interesting that misery, like the personification of misery here, has a garden full of fruits, and particularly pears. It has a garden full of basically positive things that grow from her garden. I thought that was an interesting bit of imagery in the story.
I'd like to share my interpretation of that. So if you're saying that like misery, in a sense, is filled with a garden of pleasures, and perhaps the pears might be, symbolic of something sexual, or who knows? It depends on how you read into it. But in
Yes.
one way of thinking, our pleasures and our pursuit of pleasure, in many ways, is what causes us the most suffering. So it's yeah. I mean, obviously, that's kind of the Buddhist in me coming out and talking a little bit about that. That the teachings of desire lead to suffering, and etc.
Just from personal experience, I mean, it makes sense. Whenever I've really, really wanted things like people to change or stuff to work out a particular way, or really desired this or that object, it's never actually made me as happy as I thought when I got it.
Yeah. In this context, I think the symbology of a pear tree is very interesting. First of all, the fruit itself is of the feminine form. We always hear of a pear-shaped women, that have hips for birthing and everything.
Exactly.
So it's a symbol of the feminine sexuality and fertility. The health of a pear tree will symbolize the capacity for reproduction and strong reproduction. And so it also represents motherhood.
Maybe the tree represents the family tree.
Yeah, that could definitely be it. And when it comes to Christianity, it also represents longevity and comfort. And it's a symbol of Christ's love for mankind, and a promise of salvation and eternal life. So that one definitely caught my attention in this story.
Again, when you bring up, I was just thinking, when you bring up trees and Christianity, they're eating fruit they're not allowed to have.
Yes, of course. Garden of Eden.
Yeah,
right.
I've heard that the original sin was to bringing death into the garden, basically.
Wow.
So it's intrinsically connected to death, and of the so-called. I apologize for the way I'm wording myself right now. But of the archangels that are considered quote-unquote bad, and tied to Satan and Lucifer and everything. I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but the angel of death is sort of seen as the Antichrist, because he is the bringer of death, while Christ brings eternal life.
Yes, I think he's definitely more of an Old Testament thing, isn't he?
Yeah.
I think his name's Azrael.
Yeah, something like that. It's
or something like that.
I've seen it mostly connected to Judaism, but it's also a part of Christianity, from what I saw. Mind you, I didn't get time to take the deep dive I wanted, so maybe that will go for next week. But in some circle, he is seen as the Antichrist because he is the angel of death. So I thought that was very interesting.
Well said.
No, I think it is. And I guess just a final sort of, the final bit of that story, I guess even suffering the personification of Misery herself lets her old friend go at the end with death,
Which is
which
mercy.
seems to me that, yeah, there is mercy there, yeah,
Right.
even
Beautiful.
within someone who represents misery. And I think so. It seems to have, this tale seems to have the personification of death as the sort of the comforter, the one who takes away pain
Mm-hmm.
at the end of life.
Yeah,
And I think the different perceptions of him
yeah,
as anything from someone evil to someone completely cold and logical to actually a comforter. Those are the three types I think you see.
May I jump in a
Yep.
little bit? There's someone in my family who is a nurse that her specific job is home nursing for the terminally ill. And I've
Very
assisted,
difficult.
yeah, I've assisted her throughout my life, just, here and there. We're relatives, so I see the world that she works in. And it's fascinating because I've always thought, my God, how do you do this? Like what the average person I don't think can cope with that, but she's extremely positive. She has a profound faith and a strong relationship with God. And she just has a natural positive energy that she was just born with. And that is extremely important because death is part of life as with any other part of life. And it needs its own kinds of people, its own kinds of care. We are all, people generally don't like to think about it. They kind of put it away or cover it up. But it's actually something that is just as natural as birth and all the other events in our lives. So we really should make a person's death as positive as it can be. This is something I don't know how much that we really face or talk about in our culture, but it was a profound thing for me to grow up watching her do that, and just to also just give the sense of comfort to the family as well, because that's obviously a massive change in their lives, an adjustment. But in the end, it's all this. It's this really the spirit of not attaching yourself to everything. It's the attachment to people and outcomes that kills us in a sense, and it crushes us emotionally. So there's a sense of needing to let go and doing it joyfully and compassionately. That these are the things we learn from death.
Yeah, and I think I've had some experience with the type of people who look after people at the end of their years as well, and it is a lot about helping people to come to acceptance, and that death is a natural thing, and like you say, you need to not stop caring about the person, but yes, you have to detach and trust that whatever happens to them in the next life, it's gonna work out somehow.
Well, that's the problem, is we don't have to wonder that. We don't have to. I think that adds to our fear of death and our family and friends going through death, is we don't know what's on the other side. But if you seriously investigate death, life, consciousness, and all of these components, you can come to a place of understanding and confidence, whereby you can assist these people through this transition in a way that when you show that confidence and comfort, it gives them a great deal of ease that's essential for that kind of a transformation. Nobody really wants to die, right? We're all going to be clinging to our bodies and all our loved ones and etc. But in the grand scheme of things, we have to live life knowing that none of that, you can't take it with you. That what you take with you is your karma, your spirit, your accomplishment, you're moving on to another plane, and you carry all your life experiences with you. So that's where it plugs into daily life, what you say, do, and think.
Well, today we are
That's
very
true.
disconnected with it. You know, back in the day, you didn't put your old parents in a nursing home, for example. You took care of them yourself. And you didn't have funeral homes to put the dead ones in before they were buried. That was often done in the home or in the barn or something. And they had people over with a dead person lying there, coming, paying their respects and everything. So everything around illness and death and all of that was more natural. It was more a part of life. While these days we've been programmed to push it away all the time. You know, it's that isn't happening to me. It's all in the future and everything. So
Yeah.
it's been something that is almost unnatural, I would say.
Yeah, and also a loss of the concept that one is anything more than one's body
That's an
is a little bit of a thing.
For sure.
There's definitely more people who believe that sort of quite deep down.
We're conditioned every day, all day, to get those things we want and to be defined by how much we have and all these kinds of material things. Whereas I guess the message I'm trying to get across is that what you have is who you are. And, you know, and that extends into your community, your continuity with your history, and how are you going to leave the world when you're gone? We all know that we're just actors on this stage, and that, you know, it's going to come to an end. But how are you going to leave the audience? You know, that people won't remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel, and, you know, what kind of legacy are you going to leave? That's how you live in the presence of death positively, you know, is making something of your life, not just consuming all the time, but producing things. And in any kind of way, your production could be how well you take care of your friends when they need you, or raising a child, or, you know, writing a book, or you know, not everybody has art skills or any kind of special types of skills, but you have your life. Your life is your canvas, and your heart is also your canvas in some sense too. So you have to get right with yourself regarding death. And once you get there, you will exude a light that will attract and help and heal other people.
Certainly, I think when you meet someone who doesn't have a sort of fear about what's going to happen anymore, who's got right with themselves about death and about the life and accepting what happens to them in it, you can just kind of tell when you meet those people.
For sure.
I mean, it definitely helps me to know that you've come to terms with, you know, very painful death in your life.
My journey was one where I was a devout Catholic as a child growing up in my family, and I just simply had everybody telling me, this is what it says here, this is what it is, and they're really just words and words and words, and it didn't really help at all. And I thought, I need some kind of way, system, method, practice that is an actual spiritual technology and metaphysics that I can do and think and be and pray and chant and meditate and apply it physically in my life to have actual experience with coping with life and death, and of course the grief and fear, because it's when you're 18 and your father dies, and I was very, very close to my dad. It's not just the terror, it's not just the fear, it's not just the grief and the pain, but it's the immense fear of knowing you have to spend the rest of your life alone, that you have no guide anymore. And it just catapulted me into space. and I had no compass. So yeah, I was brought up with
Yeah.
religion, but religion for me at that time, the trauma was too great. I didn't have a grounding, I guess, enough in it. I don't know. But long story short is that I kind of built my own spaceship, so to speak, with combining all these esoteric
Yeah.
understandings and practices. So, and ironically, I feel that even though I'm not technically Christian, I feel I have a more authentic experience of Christianity than people who just follow the rules, you know?
Hmm. I feel like that is a good approach to take what works,
Hmm.
to take what you feel is actually consciously doing you spiritual good. It's sort of where I'm at the moment as well
Hmm.
with my practice of paganism, just looking into a lot of sources to try and find things that actually do
Mhm.
help to deal with life and the eventuality of death.
Yeah,
So
that's all.
we've had discussions about paganism, you and I, and I'm
Yeah.
fascinated with this. I really, really, really want to learn more about it. And my question for anybody of any religion is, how does it work? So if someone just tells me a bunch of stories and information, I'm like, okay, I hear that, but what do I do? How do you drive this car?
Mhm.
What's under the hood? What is the, as I call it, spiritual technology of it? So that there will be actual changes and effects, benefits, and that it's real, that it's not imaginary. So that's the hard work that I think people are. For starters, they don't. It's easier to just do what you're told, and then outside of that, I think that it's very hard to piece all these things together. So my life was the goal and the mission of my life, to do that. So I have a lot to share in that regard, but it's something that I think maybe I'll have to do. I don't know, an episode on American Zarathustra about that, and talk more deeply.
It might end up being a series because it is an
Mm.
enormous topic.
It
And
is.
it's a kind of hard
Yeah.
getting a grip on it because it's um, it's so multifaceted and it's so vague because we don't actually know what happens. So it's and at least for me, it has ended up being okay. Am I just guessing here? Are these people just guessing and all of that? Um, and it's fundamentally something you can't really know until you cross that door of death yourself. And
It's true.
I've known 4 people, friends, that has lost their one or both parents in early life, and by that I mean before the age of 20. And also my uncle died when I was very young. I can hardly remember him. He was married into the family. So I've seen how different people have coped with losing a parent very early on, and some seem to just go on with their lives as normal. It's not necessarily close friends of mine. And but then, one, she really couldn't handle losing her mother, and I absolutely understand that because they were very close. So she has had quite a few problems dealing with that over the years. And in one way, I guess it's somewhat of a choice how you choose to deal with it. You can go into depression, like the one I know did, or like you, Donald, go searching for things and find stuff that actually works for you in practice. But I remember when my aunt died a couple of years back, and for me, the thought of my cousins being orphans, and they're not that much older than me, that was just horrifying for me. I just couldn't even picture it.
Mhm.
How do you deal with being an orphan in your 30s? It's quite a big of a shift, because suddenly you are supposed to be the older one, the old generation. You don't have those people to lean on anymore. So it's a very difficult thing to go through when you're very young.
I
Mhm.
would I would guess I could say that it's hard to go through any time in life, but when you're young, you depend on your parents. You don't even realize how much you're tied to them or an aspect of them. So when they die, you die, and you have to reinvent yourself, I guess, in some way. Um, I mean, I was certainly lost for many years, and I did many foolish things that, sort of escape the pain and this kind of thing. But that runs its course, and you realize it's not working either. That whatever the running or what have you. Um, and that's kind of what I'm saying, is that there really is nothing else to do. You must face forward. You must march forward into your destiny. You must take the cards that life gave you and play them, and play them with joy and love. And it's amazing that love is actually one of the cornerstones of all of this. And it's not something I like to talk about, because people see it in a very like Hallmark greeting card way. Like, it's very, oh, isn't that sweet? But it's actually profound, because when you're mentally, emotionally, financially, and spiritually bankrupt, and you've got nothing but suicide as a choice, then love is the thing that can bring you up and out. And where does that love come from? It's I believe technically that love and consciousness are somehow married in some regard, in some way. And granted, my this is obviously very personal, and I'm just kind of philosophizing here. That I'm sure everybody in the audience could say something really interesting on this topic and about their personal experiences. But I feel that getting in a place where you're just meditating and learning to meditate and learning to calm the mind, because the mind is just it's an organ in your body, just like any other organ. The heart pumps blood, the stomach digests food, the mind, rather the brain, not the mind, the brain produces ideas, and it makes judgments. It houses memories, and it organizes all this information and puts it together in this thing that you think is you. But it's a conglomeration of ego, experiences, culture, fears, desires, all these things. When you face death truly, you sit outside of that, and you kind of look at it like in a movie theater, and that's your life on the screen. And your consciousness is really an aspect of God. It is God, but you can't see that from the perspective of your physical manifestation, your earthly body, and your so-called identity, who you think you are. So these are all things that I'm trying to share with everyone, just so that if you get to that place where your consciousness is still, you can have eternal, like, amazing peace, and that you can see these dramas in your life in a way, actually, with compassion, and both in yourself and others, because I had to do it to survive. And then once I acquired that level of ability and understanding, and it was integrated right into my whole every cell of my body, then I can go out in life and see everybody else and all their dramas and their journeys, their problems, their egos. People are extremely transparent to me now because of this. But I don't look at it like, oh, I see right through you. I see it more like you're a child of God, like I am, and you have your own problems like I do. And so I'm going to work with it. I don't, maybe I don't always have patience, and I have my faults or ego and yada, yada. But the thing is, we're all actors that don't realize we're on stage. And once you realize this is just a kind of a play, a dharmic theater, as they would say in Buddhism, that your true self is really eternal and one with God, then you can have peace, you can have power. Compassion is natural and it flows from you. So anyway, I mean, I could really just go on and on, but I think there's another story we have to.
Yeah, that is
There
true.
is indeed. There's a couple, but it's very enlightening to hear, you know, all of this from someone who's really had to face the realities of it. You know, so it's very valuable.
Yeah.
It is
That's my,
indeed.
that's my hope, is just to leave everybody with some wisdom, some gold.
Yeah, I would just
Yeah.
like to make a short comment on what you said about how love is what you use to deal with things. I would say the same. Well, I haven't experienced death of a parent or anything. Yeah, it's always been people a bit more distant to me. I have gone through my trials as well, and one major part of what had me making it through that, definitely a trial by fire was when I finally learned how to use love, and being from a more compassionate state of mind, including to myself and everyone around me. And at least for me, it was a very conscious effort. I had to find that way by trial and error, and ultimately it's something I'm really grateful that I went through. Well, it was very difficult at the time, of course. All in all, it definitely have made me a stronger person, and hopefully a more wise one.
Beautifully said. Yeah. I think the topic of love it's tricky because, you know, how do I say it? When we hear the word love, we think romance, and that's not at all what I'm really talking about. So I don't really know. There should be a better word for this. But what I'm trying to say
The
is
ancient Greeks have like 12 words for it or something.
sure, and
Different
those are really, really good. And I would ask Nullis to bring that up when he's on your show, because he's quite eloquent in
Yeah.
talking about those things. So here's the point I'm kind of trying to make, is the love I'm talking about is actually God. And the God I'm talking about is our consciousness. I believe that God is the sum of all consciousness. I think that we are to God what dirt is to the core of the earth. So if you would try to imagine, you know, if the earth isn't hollow, that's another topic. If inside the earth is really just a star of that's hotter than the surface of the sun, and then as you go out in the layers, you will have the magma, the molten lava. Outside that, you might have crystal, and then you would have rock, and then over that is dirt. And but how is dirt any different from the center of that star? It's just a different aspect of it. And so when we see ourselves as the dust of God per se, then it changes everything. But the whole point is our attachment to ourselves, our egos, our pride, and also seeing through the lens of our senses creates the illusion that we exist as these kind of autonomous egos. And we got to have some sense of that existence. It is a truth. It's a true lie or something. I don't know. It's a combination of truths in this material world, because I'm not saying let's kind of flake off into fuzzy la la land where, oh, we don't really exist, man. We have a fight ahead of us as a people. And, we think of ourselves as the land, all our people and the land are one, as they say in the old in the old mythology. The people in the land are one. So we have to look at ourselves in this way where we're involved in a drama, we're in a story, and that's our lives. I personally believe in reincarnation, but that's another topic, and I keep kind of hogging the mic here.
That's okay.
We're in a story. Well, maybe that's why stories help us
Yeah.
to make sense of things.
Life itself is a story, right? It has a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Yeah, definitely. And as Donald said, Nolus Krampus will be our guest next Sunday for our second episode on death. So
Yes, he shall.
I hope you will all show up next Sunday as well, and hopefully we will be on time.
Hopefully,
Yeah.
yes. Oh my goodness.
I'll have a word. I'll have a
Okay.
word. I'll have a word with Loki and keep him distracted so you guys can.
If you
get
could,
through. Yes, I will.
Yeah,
it'd be great.
I'll be making sure to give Denise extra porridge to keep him happy.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to mention the actual name of the fair folk.
No, don't do
They're
that.
not getting
and,
mentioned.
No, just do everything in your power to keep them happy, so they stay out of everyone's computer.
Indeed.
Well done.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But
Shall
let's-
we have another story? Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking of taking your second one. I added a bit.
The Crystal
of,
Casket.
Yeah. Mine is a bit mischievous and stuff, so I thought that would be a good story to end the episode with. So yeah, let's have the Crystal Casket.
The Crystal Casket. There was once a widower who had a daughter. This daughter was between 10 and 12 years old. Her father sent her to school, and as she was all alone in the world, commended her always to her teacher. Now the teacher, seeing that the child had no mother, fell in love with the father, and kept saying to the girl, "Ask your father if he would like me for a wife." This she said to her every day, and at last the girl said, "Papa, the schoolmistress is always asking me if you will marry her." The father said, My daughter, if I take another wife, you will have great troubles." But the girl persisted, and finally the father was persuaded to go one evening to the schoolmistress's house. When she saw him, she was well pleased, and they settled the marriage in a few days. Poor child! How bitterly she had to repent having found a stepmother so ungrateful and cruel to her. She sent her every day out on a terrace to water a pot of basil, and it was so dangerous that if she fell, she would go into a large river. One day there came by a large eagle, and he said to her, "What are you doing here?" She was weeping because she saw how great the danger was of falling into the stream. The eagle said to her, "Get on my back, and I will carry you away, and you will be happier than with your new mamma." After a long journey, they reached a great plain, where they found a beautiful palace, all of crystal. The eagle knocked at the door and said, "Open, my ladies, open, for I have brought you a pretty girl." When the people in the palace opened the door and saw that lovely girl, they were amazed, and kissed and caressed her. Meanwhile the door was closed, and they remained peaceful and contented. Let us return to the eagle, who thought she was doing a spite to the stepmother. One day the eagle flew away to the terrace where the stepmother was watering the basil. "Where is your daughter?" asked the eagle. She replied, "Perhaps she fell from this terrace and went into the river. I have not heard from her in 10 days." The eagle answered, "What a fool you are! I carried her away. Seeing that you treated her so harshly, I carried her away to my fairies, and she is very well." Then the eagle flew away. The stepmother, filled with rage and jealousy, called a witch from the city and said to her, "You see, my daughter is alive, and is in the house of some fairies of an eagle, which often comes up on my terrace. Now you must do me the favour to find some way to kill this stepdaughter of mine, for I am afraid that some day or other she will return, and my husband, discovering this matter, will certainly kill me." The witch answered, "Oh, you need not be afraid of that. Leave it to me." What did the witch do? She had made a little basket full of sweetmeats, in which she put a charm. Then she wrote a letter, pretending that it was her father, who, having learned where she was, wished to make her this present, and the letter pretended that the father was so glad to hear that she was with the fairies. Let us leave the witch who is arranging all this deception, and return to Ermelina, for so the young girl was named. The fairies had said to her, "See, Ermelina, we are going away, and shall be absent for 4 days. Now in this time take good care not to open the door for anyone, for some treachery is being prepared for you by your stepmother." She promised not to open the door to anyone. Do not be anxious. I am well off, and my stepmother has nothing to do with me. But it was not so. The fairies went away, and the next day when Ermelina was alone, she heard a knocking at the door, and said to herself, "Knock away. I don't open to anyone." Meanwhile, the blows redoubled, and curiosity forced her to look out of the window. What did she see? She saw one of the servant girls of her own home, for the witch had disguised herself as one of her father's servants. "Oh, my dear Ermelina," she said, "your father is shedding tears of sorrow for you, because he really believed you were dead. But the eagle which carried you off and came and told him the good news that you are here with the fairies. Meanwhile, your father, not knowing what civility to show you, for he understands very well that you are in need of nothing, has thought to send you this little basket of sweetmeats." Ermelina had not yet opened the door. The servant begged her to come down and take the basket and the letter, but she said, "No, I wish nothing." But finally, since women, and especially young girls, are fond of sweetmeats, she descended and opened the door. When the witch had given her the basket, she said, "Eat this," and broke off for her a piece of the sweetmeats which she had poisoned. When Ermelina took the first mouthful, the old woman disappeared. Ermelina had scarcely time to close the door when she fell down on the stairs. When the fairies returned, they knocked at the door, but no one opened it for them. Then they perceived there had been some treachery, and began to weep. The chief of the fairies said, "We must break open the door," and so they did, and saw Ermelina dead on the stairs. Her other friends, who loved her so dearly, begged the chief of the fairies to bring her to life, but she would not, for she has disobeyed me. One and the other asked her until she consented. She opened Ermelina's mouth, took out a piece of the sweetmeat which she had not yet swallowed, raised her up, and Ermelina came to life again. We can imagine what a pleasure it was for her friends, but the chief of the fairies reproved her for her disobedience, and she promised not to do so again. Once more the fairies were obliged to depart. Their chief said, "Remember, Ermelina, the first time I cured you, but the second I will have nothing to do with you." Ermelina said they need not worry, that she would not open to anyone. But it was not so, for the eagle, thinking to increase her stepmother's anger, told her again that Ermelina was alive. The stepmother denied it all to the eagle, but she summoned anew the witch, and told her that her stepdaughter was still alive, saying, "Either you will really kill her, or I will be avenged on you." The old woman, finding herself caught, told her to buy a very handsome dress, one of the handsomest she could find, and transformed herself into a tailoress belonging to the family, took the dress, departed, went to poor Ermelina, knocked at the door, and said, "Open, open, for I am your tailoress." Ermelina looked out of the window, and saw her tailoress, and in truth was a little confused. Indeed, anyone would have been so. The tailoress said, "Come down, I must fit a dress on you." She replied, "No, no, for I have been deceived once." "But I am not the old woman," replied the tailoress. "You know me, for I have always made your dresses." Poor Ermelina was persuaded, and descended the stairs. The tailoress took to flight, while Ermelina was yet buttoning up the dress, and disappeared. Ermelina closed the door and was mounting the stairs, but it was not permitted her to go up, for she fell down, dead. Let us return to the fairies, who came home and knocked at the door, but what good did it do to knock? There was no longer anyone there. They began to weep. The chief of fairies said, "I told you that she would betray me again, but now I will have nothing more to do with her." So they broke open the door, and saw the poor girl with that beautiful dress on, but she was dead. They all wept, for they truly loved her, but there was nothing to do. The chief struck her enchanted wand and commanded a beautiful rich casket, all covered with diamonds and other precious stones, to appear. Then the others made a beautiful garland of flowers and gold and put it on the young girl, and laid her in the casket, which was so rich and beautiful that it was marvellous to behold. Then the old fairy struck her wand as usual and commanded a handsome horse, the likes of which not even the king possessed. Then they took the casket, put it on the horse's back, and led him into the public square of the city. And the chief of the fairies said, "Go, and do not stop until you find someone who says to you, 'Stop, for pity's sake, for I have lost my horse for you.' Now let us leave the afflicted fairies, and turn our attention to the horse, which ran away at full speed, who happened to pass at that moment, the son of a king, the name of this king is not known, and saw this horse with that wonder on its back. Then the king began to spur his horse, and rode him so hard that he killed him, and had to leave him dead on the road. But the king kept running after the other horse. The poor king could endure it no longer. He saw himself lost, and exclaimed, 'Stop, for pity's sake, for I have lost my horse for you.' Then the horse stopped, for those were the words. When the king saw that beautiful girl dead in the casket, he thought no more about his own horse, but took the other to the city. The king's mother knew that her son had gone hunting. When she saw him returning with his loaded horse, she did not know what to think. The son had no father, wherefore he was all-powerful. He reached the palace, had the horse unloaded, and the casket carried to his chamber. Then he called his mother and said, "Mother, I went hunting, but I have found a wife." "But what is it? A doll? A dead woman?" "Mother," replied her son, "don't trouble yourself about what it is. It is my wife." His mother began to laugh, and withdrew to her own room. What could she do? Poor mother. Now this poor king no longer went hunting, took no diversion, did not even go to the table, but ate in his own room. By a fatality it happened that war was declared against him, and he was obliged to depart. He called his mother and said, "Mother, I wish 2 careful chambermaids, whose business it shall be to guard this casket. For if, on my return, I find that anything has happened to my casket, I shall have the chambermaids killed." His mother, who loved him, said, "Go, my son. Fear nothing, for I myself will watch your casket." He wept several days at being obliged to abandon this treasure of his, but there was no help for it. He had to go. After his departure he did nothing but commend his wife, so he called her, to his mother in his letters. Let us return to the mother, who no longer thought about the matter, not even to have the casket dusted, but all at once there came a letter which informed her that the king had been victorious, and should return to his palace in a few days. The mother called the chambermaids and said to them, "Girls, we are ruined." They replied, "Why, Highness?" "Because my son will be back in a few days, and how have we taken care of the doll?" They said, "True, true. Now let us go and wash the doll's face." They went to the king's room and saw the doll's face and hands were covered with dust and fly specks. So they took a sponge and washed her face, but some drops of water fell on her dress and spotted it. The poor chambermaids began to weep, and went to the queen for advice. The queen said, "Do you know what to do? Call a tailoress, and have a dress precisely like this bought, and take off this one before my son comes." They did so, and the chambermaids went to the room and began to unbutton the dress. The moment they took off the first sleeve, Ermelina opened her eyes. Poor chambermaids sprang up in terror. One of the most courageous said, "I am a woman, and so is this one. She will not eat me." To cut the matter short, she took off the dress, and when it was removed, Ermelina began to get out of the casket, to walk about and see where she was. The chambermaids fell on their knees before her, and begged her to tell them who she was. She, poor girl, told them the whole story. Then she said, "I wish to know where I am." Then the chambermaids called the king's mother to explain it to her. The mother did not fail to tell her everything, and she, poor girl, did nothing but weep penitently. thinking of what the fairies had done for her. The king was on the point of arriving, and his mother said to the doll, "Come here, put on one of my best dresses." In short, she arrayed her like a queen. Then came her son. They shut the doll up in a small room, so that she could not be seen. The king came with great joy, with trumpets blowing and banners flying for victory, but he took no interest in all this, and ran at once to his room to see the doll. The chambermaids fell on their knees before him, saying that the doll smelled so badly that they could not stay in the palace, and were obliged to bury her. The king would not listen to this excuse, but at once called 2 of the palace servants to erect a gallows. His mother comforted him in vain. "My son, it was a dead woman." "No, no, I will not listen to any reasons. Dead or alive, you should have left it for me." Finally, when his mother saw that he was in earnest about the gallows, she rang a little bell, and there came forth no longer the doll, but a very beautiful girl, whose like was never seen. The king was amazed, and said, "What's this?" Then his mother, the chambermaids, and Ermelina were obliged to tell him all that had happened. He said, "Mother, since I adored her when dead, and called her my wife, now I mean her to be my wife in truth." "Yes, my son," replied his mother, "do so, for I am willing." They arranged the wedding, and in a few days were man and wife.
Okay, so there we had our second story for tonight, which was an interesting one, I would say.
Trina has such a great voice for storytelling. It's wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I don't know. I was awkward reading them out. Maybe sometimes I felt awkward reading them out at first. You know, when you first listen to your own voice back on recording, you're like, "That's not how I sound."
It's horrible.
No, it was that. It was that for a while. I was feeling pure distilled cringe for a while. I got used to it now.
You're too hard on yourself, Katrina. It was really lovely.
Thank you. Yeah. I found that one, and it's sort of an Italian version of, well, obviously one can immediately see the similarities to Snow White, and indeed it does fall into that sort of category. But really, what got me interested in it for a stream about death was just the fact that he really very much has, like, the ruler of a nation has just fallen in love with a corpse, essentially, in that story, which was a very odd thing to happen, I found.
I'll agree to that.
It's sort of the opposite
And
of...
I kind of wondered.
It's sort of the opposite of a king taking an otherworldly wife, you know, like a water spirit or a fae or something like that. It's somewhat of the opposite, which is interesting.
Yeah, I'll tell you an interesting thing. In Chinese culture, they have this thing that they call, I'm not really able to explain this very well, but ghost wives. And so what that would mean is if, let's say, I have a sister that maybe died when she was a little girl, and years later, I don't know, you know, I have family friends of some kind. My best friend, someone in my family might ask my friend, would you please be? I'd like to match you up with the spirit of my daughter so that she can be married too, and not feel alone in in wherever she is. I don't know, but anyway, they really literally have ghost weddings where people will marry a ghost, and it's a different culture. Obviously, it shows a whole the Chinese have way more an intimate relationship with death on a daily basis than we do in the West. It's something that I find interesting. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what would it be like to have a ghost wife. I don't know how that would work.
I don't really know how that would work either. I mean, the most similar thing I've ever heard of in Western culture was, I swear there was I was looking into the Mormon church for a time. Don't ask. I just go down internet rabbit holes. But they were having like ceremonies. Like yeah, there's a lot of stuff, sort of exposing Mormonism and that sort of stuff. But they had they were having like ceremonies for the dead in the next world, and I think marriages there as well. I wonder if that's something that they've sort of gotten from Eastern culture. It's very interesting that they have ghost wives.
I think
Makes sense though.
what
Spirits of the dead don't want to be lonely.
sure I would assume, but that implies that you can be lonely in the afterlife. That you have to wonder what sort of spirit body do they possess? How did they become lonely? Why are they separate from other people? What it opens up a
That's true.
yeah, I just find it fascinating.
Yeah, definitely an interesting concept. It sort of reminded me of South American shamans. I looked into shamanism for a time, and they have whole families in the spirit world. They take wives and have children with them and everything. So, and many of them also have.
Okay, now I'm really curious as to how that works.
Yeah, many of them have, families in our world as well. So, talk about being haggard by families. Yeah, in every realm.
Being nagged by your real wife, being nagged by your ghost wife. Got your real children. At least you probably don't got to feed your ghost children.
It's
Oh,
a hard
dear.
life. It's a hard life.
No, that is fascinating. This idea of having families in the other world. I think it sort of feels similar to the sort of grave goods thing. Like there's sort of an expectation in some cultures that you will have some sort of like something resembling your normal life in afterlife,
Yeah, it doesn't.
and that you might need certain things like your tools.
Yeah, it
and
doesn't
stuff like that.
takes the mind to the grave mounds with all the grave goods and even servants that were sacrificed and animals to bring with them in the afterlife.
It's quite fascinating. I think about a friend of mine who is a Native American in the Iroquois Nation, and I did ask him, what's the religion of the Iroquois people? What's your view of heaven, for example? And he says, "Oh, we call that the happy hunting ground." So that like happiness or heaven to these people is being in a place where there's plenty of animals to hunt, and that nature is bountiful. And I think I suppose it's natural that we're going to anthropomorphize death in some sense, but I guess until we go or we leave here, we won't really know. Something I do recommend people look into is that there are probably thousands of interviews online on places like YouTube of people who died and came back to life. So when my father had his heart attack, he technically died. His heart stopped, and they used a fibrillator to shock it and start it again. He didn't have any kind of like it. The time between his, the death and them bringing him back wasn't very long, so he was fine. But I think it would be interesting for people to look up these interviews. These are people that have like profoundly intense death experiences where they meet relatives and spirits and good and bad. But if you just spend just an hour listening to these interviews, I think it will be very enriching for sure.
Yeah, I would
I do think so, yeah.
Yeah, it also takes my mind to stories about children who remember past lives. I've heard quite a few of those, and there's instances where they can, at the age of 3 or 4, accurately describe uniforms several centuries ago, and there is no way they could have learned that in any other way. So I think that is somewhat in the same realm, so to speak.
So in paganism, in Odinism, what's the ideas on reincarnation specifically? Is there any connection?
So it can happen, definitely. I mean, there's one poem. There's poems in the Edda about Sigurd, the hero, who is said and to have been reincarnated, Sigurd and Brunhild. So they're said to have been reincarnated and gone around a couple of times. It's sort of like because of their fate to sort of they were sort of crossed in love. It's quite complicated to go into, but there is record of it happening.
Okay. You know why? Why would it happen? Like, why is it explained why someone would have to reincarnate?
Well, for
No, it's not
Montesquieu,
necessarily.
it's always reincarnation within the same family, and it's usually into a descendant that has the same name. So, but the sources are a bit scarce on that, so it's a bit hard to say.
Yeah. The sources are definitely a bit scarce on it. It usually seems to be to do with therefore fulfilling the family destiny in that case. I mean, in the Norse tradition, you do have ancestral spirits that are attached to you, female ones, that are your ancestral sort of guides and that will advocate for you when you go to the afterlife. You have to have done something pretty bad for them to leave you, and then they will sort of follow down the family line as well. But when you there's a lot of gap filling to do, and when you sort of look at Valhalla as sort of the place for those who've achieved transcendence in battle, well, then you do have to wonder, what happened to everybody else. And therefore, a lot of us arrive at the explanation of reincarnation, and that when you go to hell, with one L, not the Christian hell, it's more sort of it seems from what I can figure out to be more sort of a neutral realm in many ways. It's not really eternal suffering, but it's not the glorious afterlife either. So there's no. I've heard ideas of, say, the shores of hell being where you're basically waiting to go into a new life. And also, you have this idea of rebirth with Ragnarok. There will be a new birth of the world, according, to what's written down after Ragnarok. And, it's the people in Valhalla who sort of fight the final battle and die like a second death and sort of, I guess, become one with the new universe.
This is deeply inspiring to me. Like the concept of like an age of rebirth, that itself is it shows like the cyclical nature of life and the cosmos, in some sense. When I talk about my belief in reincarnation with people, especially sort of like people who are into like scientism, the materialism where everything has to fit within that that kind of like limited view of the world, I always say, I start off by saying, it's understood that atoms cannot be destroyed, that they are in fact energy, and that they can only transform. And when you start from that perspective, these kind of people that have that materialist view of life, they begin to see, okay, yeah, I get that. That does actually make sense. But again, it's transcending the ego, I think, is the whole game. It's the whole narrative. And who's to say what life is like on the other side and how many levels or dimensions there are? We live in the third dimension, you could say. So, the spirit, I'd say the ghost realm is probably the fourth dimension, where you have a spirit body, you're not limited by time and space as we are. And that it's easy for them to kind of come and go into the third dimension, but we can't go into the fourth dimension unless we learn practices like meditation and lucid dreaming and all that stuff. So it's very esoteric. I'm not an expert on things, so I don't pretend to know everything about it.
Yeah. But yeah, certainly in my tradition anyway, that's where I get the notion of reincarnation from. There's also something to say that, the people who are not in the most glorious realms of the afterlife will come back and populate the new universe. I mean, one of the people who's not in the most glorious realms of the afterlife is Balder, because he never got to die in battle. He was, killed, tricked. His brother was tricked by Loki into killing him with mistletoe. So he has actually gone down to hell. And then in the universe, according to the tradition, he's come back. Probably along with many of the people who were.
Can I ask you, could you do like a sort of a symbolic reading of that? Like what might that be an analogy for in life?
I guess it seems to me to represent. He seems to represent the sun to me quite a lot. And he seems to represent, enlightenment and wisdom of the gods in that age having been lost. Yes. Symbolically in life, Ragnarok is basically when society has. I don't think it's probably literally going to happen. I think it's when society is degenerated to its lowest point that it can possibly get to, and families are turning on families, and no morals anymore, and there's no light.
Ragnarok.
I think that's kind of what it is.
Ragnarok is an earthly event. It's not a cosmic event.
I think it's hard to say whether there's going to be a literal dude with a flaming sword and a giant wolf trying to eat the world.
Though that would be cool. That would be cool.
That would be cool. But maybe it won't happen. Maybe that's just the metaphor, like the closest thing that humans have, where they can understand what's going to happen and the battle of chaos versus order that is going to happen.
I tend to look for the meaning of the story and how it helps us in life. And perhaps, I'm not at all an expert. I know next to nothing about these ideas, Odinism, paganism. And that's why I want to learn so much from both of you. But my point I'm making is that perhaps Ragnarok is every individual's facing death. It's the battle of our final battle of facing our own mortality.
I think you could be right there. I think each individual has their own personal Ragnarok. In that they're going to have to face up to the sum total of everything they've done in life and come to terms with it before death.
Yeah. But here again,
they're going to have to be okay with it.
Also,
well, here
another
again,
point.
the theme of glory, and facing that with a sense of joy, almost, that to go into battle with this like fever of loving the glory of the battle, and then to die with honor, and that be your legacy. That's pretty much how I started talking about the show, and I guess I'm trying to see if that is in the Odinist cosmology.
Well, an interesting point on that question is how what we see from the heroes is that they accept their destiny when they learn of it. For example, within the Volsung saga with Sigurd, the character is, or the person is told his fate, and he still goes through with it. And the only character who doesn't do that, who actively tries to postpone it, is Odin, trying to postpone Ragnarok. And, gathers fallen warriors around him to fight beside him in that final battle and everything. So that's definitely an interesting question. And one I have to think more about.
I feel that life is all about finding the right question, to be honest, because then you can unravel the mysteries of these things.
Definitely.
I mean, I'm still asking a lot about my own faith. The main comfort that I get from my own faith is that I know just no matter how bad things get, there is a rebirth. Things don't stop no matter how much we degenerate and how bad it seems. And I think I mainly take comfort in the idea of that at the moment.
That, if I can jump in, is quite fascinating, because you have two attitudes. One of, God, make it stop. Like, I wish that all the things going on that I'm dealing with would stop. I'm that's hurting me. I'm angry. I'm scared. The future, blah, blah, blah. Or looking at it and saying, nothing ever stops. This is an eternal dream, and I'm the author. I script my own life, and I choose my actions and my words and my attitude, and I'm going to live through this theater, this drama, and I'm going to do something heroic in this time that I have on this earth. Because again, this body is really just the clothing of, it's the makeup on my soul, so to speak, as you pass through this world. So I keep coming back to that, and I do feel that it seems to be present within, dare I say, mythologies of Europe, and even perhaps around the world. But it's, I'm wondering, I know what's right for me, but I'm curious sort of what the audience thinks, and I'd like to know, what you think in terms of like, does that make sense in terms of like, does that attitude match the mythology or paganism that you study?
Yeah, I think in terms of those two camps of people, I see them, definitely. I spent a lot of time firmly in the make it stop camp. I wasn't in the best of places when that happened.
I hear you.
But I guess coming to paganism just helped me appreciate the divine spark in literally everything. Trees and rivers and mountains and, all of these things are divine, and that, in the sources, Europeans themselves are descended from our gods. And so we have that. That is how we have that divine in us, according to our tradition. And I guess it's hard to put into words.
Yeah.
But
So
it offers me comfort that order and beauty are always maintained in balance
mm,
with the chaos,
hmm so
and
this,
you can't destroy that divinity.
perfectly said. So why would you want to identify with this material body that just grows old and dies when your, in a sense, your true home and your true heart is within the divinity, within the sort of miraculous sacredness of all things around us. It's easy for us to see it in nature, how beautiful nature is, the touch of God and the design of nature. It's beautiful and inspiring, it's divine. Why do we not see ourselves as part of that design? So I think when you release yourself from this delusion of self to the extent where you are now, you're in a sense limitless. You're a part of nature in this 3D world. Nature has met a lot more. Our tools of perception can only see and hear and taste and feel so much within this physical form. But while we're here, in some ways, this world is perfect in its own way. So I think like if we can ground ourselves and make stake our claim in the divine and tether ourselves to it, then we can get through all these changes. And boy, are we getting through some changes. I mean, it's kind of a political Ragnarok happening globally right now. And I think, we don't, that's a whole other topic, but everybody's feeling it. It's happening.
We
We're
do,
about to go
we,
into battle.
It feels a lot like that.
we do live in the wolf age.
It
that,
feels.
The Norse talked about, and it's coming to a head, whether we like it or not, whether we want to or not. It's metaphorically speaking, a war that has been taken to us, and not one we want ourselves, but we have to fight. We can't just give up and go quietly into that night.
At night. Well done. Beautifully
Yeah.
done.
We did have a question from Shadow
Yeah.
of the Beast. If Baldur was representative of the sun or associated with the sun. Do you have anything
Well,
on
a
that?
lot of people seem to argue that he was that because he is sort of he definitely seems solar to me. He's like the light of the gods. The one thing that they don't want to lose. The source of all illumination and knowledge. He definitely seems symbolic of the sun to me.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm still trying to figure it out a bit.
He's also.
I still have a lot of questions to ask.
Yeah, he's also called the White, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Just like the sunlight is, yeah.
Yeah. So it's definitely tied to the light, and of course, the sun is the physical manifestation of that. And everyone loved him. You could say he was goodness personified in many ways. So of course, the forces of chaos wanted to take that specific one out. So I would definitely say that he's a solar figure.
That's true. Well, we have one last story. And that was yours, Lynx.
Yeah.
The boy with the keg of ale.
Yeah. It's a Norwegian one, not my own translation this time, but it's a variation of a story that we see through most of Europe, so I'm sure some of you will know the themes related. But it also have a few connections to a few other stories that we've told before. So I hope you enjoy.
The Boy with the Ale Keg. Once upon a time there was a boy who had served a man in the northern mountains for a long time. This man was a master at ale brewing. It was so uncommonly good, the like of it was not to be found. So when the boy was to leave his place and the man was to pay him the wages he had earned, he would not take any other pay than a keg of Yule ale. Well, he got it, and set off with it, and he carried it both far and long. But the longer he carried the keg, the heavier it got, and so he began to look about, to see if anyone were coming with whom he might have a drink, that the ale might lessen and the keg lighten. And after a long
I'm sorry, I'm having audio issues with that one, apparently. I'm not quite sure what has happened there. I think it must have been when I was doing the story, finishing it up. So but I do want to play it anyway. It will only take me a very short time to fix that. So if Katrina and Donald will riff for a couple of minutes while I sort that.
Sure thing.
I could hit play on YouTube.
Actually, it sounded fine to me.
Oh, I'm sorry. It came.
Yeah.
The audio came in double for me. So
Maybe,
Maybe you had two tabs open.
no.
or maybe mute.
I'm sorry. Apparently, it was something strange happening on my end. So if it came well in for you guys, I will just restart it. We only got a minute
Go
in,
ahead.
so okay, enjoy again.
Cool.
The Boy with the Ale Keg. Once upon a time there was a boy who had served a man in the northern mountains for a long time. This man was a master at ale brewing. It was so uncommonly good, the like of it was not to be found. So when the boy was to leave his place and the man was to pay him the wages he had earned, he would not take any other pay than a keg of Yule ale. Well, he got it, and set off with it, and he carried it both far and long. But the longer he carried the keg, the heavier it got, and so he began to look about, to see if anyone were coming with whom he might have a drink, that the ale might lessen and the keg lighten. And after a long time he met an old man with a big beard. "Good day," said the man. "Good day to you," said the boy. "Where are you going?" asked the man. "I am looking for someone to drink with me and lighten my keg," said the boy. "Can't you drink with me as well as with anyone else?" said the man. "I have traveled both far and wide, and I am both tired and thirsty." "Well, why shouldn't I?" said the boy. "But tell me, where are you from and what sort of man are you?" "I am the Lord and come from heaven," said the man. "I will not drink with you," said the boy, "for you make such distinctions between persons here on earth, and you divide the rights so unevenly that some get so rich and some so poor. No, I will not drink with you." And having said this, he trudged off again with his keg. When he had gone a bit farther, the keg grew too heavy again. He thought he could not carry it any longer unless someone came with whom he might drink, and so lessened the ale in the keg. Yes, he met an ugly, scrawny man who came rushing along. "Good day," said the man. "Good day to you," said the boy. "Where are you going?" asked the man. "Oh, I'm looking for someone to drink with and lighten my keg," said the boy. "Can't you drink with me as well as with anyone else?" said the man. "I have traveled both far and wide, and I am tired and thirsty." "Well, why not?" said the boy. "But who are you, and where do you come from?" "Who am I? I am the devil, and I come from hell. That's where I come from," said the man. "No," said the boy. "You only torment and plague poor folk, and if there is any unhappiness astir, they always say it is your fault. I will not drink with you." So he went far and farther than far again with his ale keg on his back, until he thought it grew so heavy that there was no carrying it any farther. He began to look around again if anyone was coming with whom he might have a drink and lighten his keg. So after a long time another man came, and he was so dried up and scrawny that it was a wonder that his bones hung together. "Good day," said the man. "Good day to you," said the boy. "Where are you going?" asked the man. "Oh, I was only looking about to see if I could find someone to drink with, that my keg might be lightened a little. It is so heavy to carry." "Can't you drink with me as well as with anyone else?" said the man. "Yes, why not?" said the boy. "But what sort of man are you?" "They call me Death," said the man. "I will gladly drink with you," said the boy. And as he said this, he put down his keg and began to tap the ale into a bowl. "You are a good man, for you treat all alike, both rich and poor." So he drank to his health, and Death drank to his health. And Death had never tasted such a drink, and as the boy was fond of him, they drank bowl after bowl, until the ale was lessened and the keg grew light. At last Death said, "I have never known drink which tasted better, or did me so much good as this ale that you have given me, and I scarce know what to give you in return." But after he had thought a while, he said the keg should never get empty, however much they drank out of it, and the ale that was in it should become a healing drink, by which the boy could make the sick whole again better than any doctor. And he also said that when the boy came into a sick man's room, Death would always be there and show himself to him, and it should be to him a sure sign if he saw Death at the foot of the bed that he could cure the sick with the draught from the keg. But if he sat by the pillow, there was no healing nor medicine, for then the sick person belonged to Death. Well, the boy soon grew famous and was summoned far and near, and he helped many to health again who had been given up. When he came in and saw how Death sat by a sick man's bed, he foretold either life or death, and his foretelling was never wrong. He became both a rich and powerful man, and at last he was summoned to a king's daughter, far, far away in the world. She was so dangerously ill that no doctor thought he could do her any good, and so they promised him all that he might ask for if he could only save her life. Now when he came into the princess's room, there sat Death at her pillow. But as he sat, he dozed and nodded, and while he did this, she felt better. "Now life or death is at stake," said the doctor, "and I fear from what I see there is no hope." But they said he must save her if it cost land and realm. So he looked at Death, and while he sat there and dozed again, he made a sign to the servants to turn the bed around so quickly that Death was left sitting at the foot. And at that very moment he turned the bed, and the doctor gave it a draught, and her life was spared. "Now you have cheated me," said Death, "and we are quits." "I was forced to do it," said the doctor, "unless I wish to lose land and realm." "That shall not help me much," said Death. "Your time is up, for now you belong to me." "Well," said the boy, "what must be must be, but do let me have time to read the Lord's Prayer first." Yes, he might have leave to do that, but he took very good care not to read the Lord's Prayer. He read everything else, but the Lord's Prayer never crossed his lips, and at last he thought he had cheated Death for good and all. But when Death thought he had really waited too long, he went to the boy's house one night and hung up a large tablet over against his bed. This tablet had painted the Lord's Prayer on it. So when the boy woke up in the morning, he began to read the tablet and did not quite see what he was doing until he came to Amen. But then it was too late, and Death had him. Okay, so a little mischievous story there at the end. When you
when you just read it, it can, go a bit both ways.
Mm.
But in total, I definitely thought it was a bit more mischievous. First the boy going ranting about fairness from God and the devil and rejecting both. But death is perfectly fine because he treats everyone equal. So
The great equalizer.
Indeed.
yeah, and
The great equalizer.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
I
when
do.
Yeah, I like how this guy.
I'm sorry. Who goes
Sorry.
first? No, I was just going to say I do love this concept of tricking death. I think it's a wonderful narrative device. Of course, the pear tree story earlier. It's I have to admit I kind of like to see death on the short end of the stick for a little while, just for once, But it's a fun. I think there's a dark humor to it, but it can point to the sort of the foibles or the how do I say the kind of the how do I put this, like our trying to cheat death is kind of silly in a way, and the whole idea of running from death, granted, I don't mean untimely death or tragic death or death that's that kind of thing, but just from a folk literature perspective, it's a fun device.
Mm-hmm. And it
Yeah.
became particularly fun because Death became impatient. He's never going to read those verses, so I'm going to make him read them.
Yeah, patience is not my
Yep.
defining trait either, so
Yeah.
I'm actually relating with.
Can't get one over on death.
Yeah. There's a lovely.
Yeah, I just like how this.
No,
Sorry.
you go. Go ahead.
No, I was just thinking, I just like how this guy in the story is like, what? No, I'm not talking to you, Jesus or God. Everything's not completely equal, and therefore it must be wrong. Was this guy the proto-liberal? Oh dear.
Yeah.
The Prototypical. That's the name of my new band, right there.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting that it points to these tendencies that we really see manifest in our times to the extreme degree that they've been with us for a long time. I would think that story is one of those with one of the oldest roots back to our ancestors and Indo-Europeans and everything. It has similarities with Smith and the Devil, which goes back 6,000 to 7,000 years, and so it's nothing new. There's nothing new under the sun, basically. So
Now, I wonder what the barrel of ale symbolizes. The idea of, oh, won't you drink some with me to lighten the weights? That seems like there's a good drinking song in there somewhere.
probably, it definitely points to
Yes.
the Norwegian tradition of Yule ale when Christianity came in. And we had a Christian king, but still a lot of the population were pagans. The king decreed that everyone had to brew Yule ale, which was, of course, a pagan thing. But
I'm moving to Norway then.
oh, it's still a very much alive, that tradition today.
Good, very good.
All of the breweries have their own Yule ale, and of course every city has their own brewery, though they are now owned by very few companies, but they still keep their old recipes and everything. So and everyone has their favorite. So
Good, at least.
yeah. But what it represents, I would say it's something similar to the elixir of life. It
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's a drink that restores health and all of that. Though I do wonder with how he was able to cheat death from the princess, in that death had to be present not just in body but also consciously, in that he was dosing, so the man was able to trick the devil there. So how much does that drink do or not, was one question I was left with quite a few times.
All I want to know is, what does it taste like?
Well, that is a good question. Apparently,
That's
it's
true.
very, very good.
And when can we try some?
Yeah, there is that. I wouldn't have tasted that a couple of times during my life.
Because
Yeah.
I guess it brings up the question of temptation, that the idea of temptation, and wine or beer or mead or whatever alcohol, it symbolizes pleasure, but that there's a price to pay for that pleasure, the kind of the headache in the morning, or the silly deeds that you did while you were drunk. So it actually, ale or beer or this kind of alcohol, it has a very meaningful and fun literary device.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the story, it said that Death would be sitting there and he would be indicating whether or not the drink would cure the person. So it seemed like the drink only cured those who were capable of being cured anyway.
Yeah.
I feel like it.
Yeah, well, I was wondering because if the point is where death stands at a certain point, apparently the princess was meant to die, but she didn't because the bed was turned around. So, how much was the drink and how much was death? But I guess that's one of the questions that you really can't answer.
Yeah. Do I have to do all the work?
Yeah.
Indeed, you've been contributing so much.
Oh no, I mean like to to know all the answers of life and death. That's the joke I'm making.
Yeah.
I think there's been a lot of people spent a lot of time poring over a lot of books about that.
Yeah, indeed.
I think ultimately, yes, each individual does have to do most of the work for themselves. A few good starter resources, though.
Yeah, it seems to me that it's not until people get up there in age when they start taking this question seriously, because they can sense their own mortality. But I always advise people, like, the younger or the sooner the better. Why go through life fearing death? That's insane. And not only that, there's so much treasure in the wisdom that you gain from understanding death, because that obviously tells you what your life is and gives meaning, purpose, direction. I think the fear that we have is largely grounded in our pride and also our kind of desire. We aren't going to live forever, and we know that. And it's, in a sense, childish to think that we can. And there's always that sense of, well, I wanted to do that one thing, or that was that one accomplishment, or that dream, or that goal. And there's no other life that you're going to get. I guess maybe if you're into reincarnation, you might, but there's no other time than now. And regardless of the circumstances, you just keep driving forward and have a productive and creative mind. But I don't know. I tend to go off on my little rants with these things.
That's okay. But death is the ultimate counterpoint to living your life. So living with that consciously in your mind can be a very good force to drive you on. While the fear of death might hold you back, because then you essentially live in fear, and that's not the best starting point to living your life.
Beautifully said.
Thank you.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, Lynx, the background music of your story is stuck in my head.
Mine as well.
Very much reminds me of the game Monkey Island 1. Possibly the best to click. I just want to load my save game. Oh dear.
It's one of those.
That's gonna be stuck in my head.
Yeah, you can find the link in the YouTube description to the speaker. He does actually quite a few good tunes. He also did the piano sections I used in A Christmas Carol, and that also stuck in my head completely throughout Christmas and a few weeks afterwards, and the story itself is still in my head. So I have to get on a Christmas Carol detox or something.
Oh no. That one.
I'm unashamedly in love with Christmas carols and Christmas everything. So, when people complain about that's coming out too soon or whatever, I'm like, it's not soon enough. I love Christmas.
Yeah. Well, I did the story, A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens for Christmas. The staves are up on YouTube, and I was going to point that out, make people aware. Our library is up to date. We have finally got that connected to our YouTube, so it will automatically update from that. So for those who aren't that fond of YouTube for whatever reason, you can also go there. The link is in our descriptions, in the About section on DLive, and I'm not sure if you have it on Twitter and everything, but we'll check our other social media and get it out there.
Yeah. But it's certainly been a great show tonight. Very, very deep discussion, as you would expect, of the theme. And thank you for being with us tonight, Donald, and for being extremely patient with us. During that delay.
Well,
would you like to tell people?
So I was gonna say, no, I just wanted to thank you for having me. It's actually my pleasure to be in your presence and on your show. So it's such a joy. When you invited me, I was so thrilled. Thank you.
Well, it's been wonderful.
Would you like to tell people?
I'll just tell people where they can find me. How about that? So AmericanZarathustra.com is my website. It links out to my YouTube channel, where I have American Zarathustra music, interviews, and then also that's where you can find my show, Imperium Art. Imperium Art is co-hosted by my friend Gaius Nullis, who also has a show on White Art Collective on every other Sunday. That's Conversations with the Wind. And I joined him there for that as well. So the Imperium Art Show is about documenting the arts coming out of the white positive sphere. It's white identity political art. And so it's quite an exciting experience. We don't just have artists on. We also have vloggers, philosophers, writers, people in different realms to talk about the arts in the dissident right. And so it's a really, really great show, something that, we're discovering more and more about our people, our culture, understanding ourselves. And it's very, very enriching and empowering, to be honest. So I strongly urge everybody to go to my YouTube. That's also American Zarathustra. And subscribe, share, comment, get involved in the conversation. That's part of why I'm so excited to be on this show, Hearth of Europa, because this show is contributing to the arts and culture in our sphere. So again, once again, hats off to you ladies. It's just a joy to be in your presence.
Well, thank you. It's been wonderful to having you on. And, this show, at least for me, is a labor of love. It is quite a bit of work, but it's so rewarding doing that. Even
Indeed.
down on a personal level, because I'm learning so much looking into these stories and, looking into the themes and the origins and everything. So, I'm just glad that people like it. And we want to keep the flame of Europe alive. And to do that, we have to know our roots, our origin. And our stories are very much a part of that. And we want to pass that on to the coming generations. We will post the links in our different social media where people can find you. So yeah, go check it out. It's so much content there. I've hardly been able to brush the surface of it. So thank you for your work.
My pleasure, and we'll be in touch for sure. And also thank you to everybody in the audience for your engagement and your patience and hanging around and just being part of the family. It's always a pleasure to see all my old friends and make some new friends too.
Yeah, thank you so much to the audience.
Yeah. We love our sparks. They're great, and we can see people here. I agree, and Euphemia, and we see like familiar faces, and it's like we always really say it's really, really cool.
Yeah, and non-fake news
so
and
cool.
everything.
Special shout out to Euphemia for all her fantastic engagement in the chat as well too. She's incredible.
Yeah. And also I would like to give a shout out to Right Meow and Burika and White Rabbit Radio for hosting us. That is very much appreciated.
Hosts.
Yeah.
And non-fake news who dropped like 3 diamonds.
Nice.
In a row.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
that was like raining rocks.
Yeah, diamond rain. And also, of course, Big Hair Tsunami, who had a flurry of subscriptions to our listeners. That is very much appreciated, as always. So,
Euphemia gave some subscriptions as well, I think, as well.
Yeah.
That was very nice of both of them.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be having you here. But since that song I played fell into everyone's taste, I thought I could set that up quickly as an outro for the song. So.
Should we do the chest?
Oh yeah, the chest.
Give some lemons.
Yeah.
Let's do the chest.
Yeah. Give me that.
I'm pounding my
lemons
right now.
Right. Let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah, always the lemons. Again, we always have the 30-second countdown to the lemons, which does feel like it does need a drum roll, but we have not yet got a lemon drum roll.
Yeah.
Keep meaning to do that.
Yeah, we'll.
Why not free?
We'll get around to that as well.
Oh, there's a ghost pepper in the chat.
Ooh.
Cool. Ooh, very cool.
Oh.
So I'm gonna put my
Lynx, you got lemons.
This is the first time I've won.
You got lemons, Lynx.
Yeah, I did. It's the first time I've won lemons on DLive ever. Ooh.
Woo!
That was quite fun, actually.
That's lemons.
Yeah, and also we have non-fake news, archaeology music, Shadow of the Beast, and Arta Book. So, or Arta Bock. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that name. So, congratulations, everyone.
Nice. Well, that is it for tonight, everyone.
I will quickly.
And we hope you've enjoyed the show.
Yeah.
Indeed.
While you two say goodbye, I will set up the music. So to everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for
good
joining
night.
us.
Yeah, like we say, got Nullus Abnormocracy usually. That's his usual name. Still Nullus Krampus at the moment. That was a Christmas change. But yeah, we've got Nullus on next week. He's going to be showing more sort of his perspectives on the theme of death. I recommend actually that you watch the Conversations with the Wind on the Plague. I found that quite interesting, and it's indeed quite related to the theme of death and the current times. So I reckon you should all watch that. Lovely to see you all. Bye, everyone.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye, YouTube.
I am almost there, so just a few more seconds, and let's.
Doodle Squatch. I think you did miss it. Maybe you got in the YouTube quite late. Don't worry though, we are always on replay.
Yeah.
And we put up all of our individual stories as individual videos as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a good stream to listen to in its entirety. Talked about some deep stuff.
Yeah. The song is called "Grim Grinning Ghosts." It's originally from some Disney thing, I think. So the link is in YouTube description, and I will post that one also over on DLive for those who want to listen to the song and perhaps download it. It's free of use. It's copyright free. So yeah, I have the song ready, and let's enjoy that, and good night, everyone.